hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Manifest Podcast. This episode is actually a bonus one this week because I felt so inspired to share this information with you. Recently, I have been exploring creativity in a whole new way. I started a brand new community over on School called Create Through Chaos. You can join. It's completely free by going to createthroughchaos.com, or there is a link in the description of this episode. And I have something really exciting to announce. I am actually hosting a free masterclass on the 7th of July at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where I will be exploring how to create through chaos. And what that actually means is that it's the awareness that as artists, entrepreneurs, musicians, writers, whatever you may be or categorize yourself in as a creative, we go through different seasons in our lives, the ups and the downs, the ebbs and the flows. And one thing that happens is sometimes we stop creating, but we don't see it as a really powerful mechanism to alchemize that energy during that time to create extraordinary work. And also to create something powerful and meaningful. And we don't utilize that energy. Instead, we scroll through Netflix or Instagram or whatever it happens to be, and we distract ourselves rather than paying attention to the offering energetically that is right in front of us. So I would love for you to join me for this free masterclass. It's free to register, free to join the group, and you can go to createthroughchaos.com. Okay, so today's episode is a really special one, and it's actually based on a Substack article that I wrote recently titled "The Day I Met Vali Myers and Didn't Know Who She Was." And at the time, I had absolutely no idea, no clue of her creative influence. Because sometimes the people who shape your life and inspire you creatively arrive before you're ready to understand who they are exactly. So this story is about when I was about 18, maybe I had just turned 19. The year was somewhere around 1998, and my dad and I were out for the afternoon. I think we went out for lunch, and there was a local library in the suburb. We lived in this very small suburb called Fitzroy in Melbourne, Australia. It's actually, I believe, the smallest suburb in all of Melbourne. And there were like hundreds of pubs there. There was like the smallest suburb with the most amount of pubs and restaurants. It was a very artsy community back then, at least anyway in the late 90s. And we walked past the town hall and the library on our way home, and we saw this sign that said exhibition open. And it was like this, I remember it was a white door that was kind of cracked open just a little bit that led to a staircase. And so we decided to wander in one afternoon, and it turned out that it was an exhibition by an artist named Vali Myers. And so what's interesting about this is my dad is an artist as well. So if you Google A.A. Prout, you can see he's the real deal. So, we were always interested in artists and work and galleries. And, I've grown up in galleries and studios my entire life. That was my childhood, seeing my dad with a watercolor in production, whether it was a commission or whether he was working towards an exhibition. He had a gallery. He was always and still is very creative. And so we had this, opportunity to go and see this artist, and we did. We took that opportunity and went into this gallery setting. And so Vali, this woman, welcomed us in, and she invited us to sit on the floor with her. My dad told Vali that he painted European architecture, and they chatted for a while. And she asked me if I was an artist, and I timidly told her that I had been studying at art school. And I think I told her I had designed wrapping paper for Hallmark in 1994, but the details are really fuzzy. And I remember that back then, if anyone asked me a question, especially as a teenager, I wasn't a mature teenager, but I was always taking things in. I wasn't prompting conversations with people, but I was always chatty when somebody else would initiate it. So I think I must have offered the information. But remember, this was a long time before anyone carried a camera in their pocket. There were no selfies or Instagram stories. There were no carefully documented memories. So I I really have to try my best to think back to the 40 or so minutes that we spent in there with Vali. So there were just 3 people sitting on the floor, me, my dad, and Vali Myers. And I think that there was like an exhibition coordinator or somebody there as well. It was either welcoming people in or she was taking care of things in the background. And Vali, this extraordinary woman, was quietly working away on one of her drawings. So she was resting it on her lap and she was sketching away with what looked like a quill. It was a feather. And she had a little ink pot. And so she would dip it in there and go back to the page time and time again. And at the time, I had absolutely no idea who she was and how special this experience was. I didn't know that she'd become a muse to an entire generation of artists, writers, and musicians. I didn't know, I had completely no idea that she'd crossed paths with people like Salvador Dali, Patti Smith, Tennessee Williams, and Andy Warhol, that her work would eventually find its way into collections owned by people like Mick Jagger, and she became one of those rare artists whose life was every bit as captivating as her work. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know she had become one of Australia's most celebrated artists. I had no clue she'd chosen to live for years in a sanctuary with her lover in the Italian countryside, surrounded by animals she loved, especially foxes, who would become recurring companions in both life and in her art. I remember seeing the foxes and the owls in her art pieces. And I didn't know there would be articles online one day about the witch of Positano, and I'm doing air quotes as I say that. And you can Google Vali Myers, have a look, check out the YouTube videos. There's lots of really fascinating documentaries about her. But I didn't know who she was, and I only knew that she fascinated me. Vali looked unlike anyone I'd ever met before. Her flaming red hair, the intricate facial tattoos that she had, which I discovered later that she'd done herself. Like she'd actually done it with the old stick and poke method. And her piercing eyes, they were so piercing. And she seemed less like someone performing individuality and more like someone who had become completely herself. She was totally at ease. And while we sat together, she continued drawing. Her work was intricate, haunting, and utterly mesmerizing. I didn't know she was also facing illness at the time, or that she would face passing over her transition in 2003, which is why seeing her create in real time was so incredibly inspiring. Again and again, I noticed images of herself woven through the work on the walls of the studio: foxes, flowers, tattoo motifs, mythical creatures, owls. It was just such an incredible experience. What I noticed about her artwork is that every line and pen stroke and color that she chose seemed to come from somewhere wild and deeply personal. And so what inspired this article actually was recently I came across an essay by an online friend, Lisa Lister, who described Vali as someone who lived her entire life like the full moon phase, bold, bright, and fully lit up by love, art, and magic. And when I came across that article on Substack, reading those words brought me straight back to that afternoon. And I'd completely forgotten about it until I was reminded. I jumped in the comments as fast as I could in the comments section to mention that I had met Vali a very long time ago. And truthfully, that description of Vali is exactly how she felt to me. Not theatrical or performative, just simply free. She felt free. And I didn't leave that day. Back in the late 90s thinking, I want to be Vali Myers or be like Vali Myers. I left thinking something much quieter. Maybe it's possible to build your life around creating no matter what you were going through. And not long afterwards, I threw myself into painting. I created a body of highly detailed, in-depth work and held my first solo art exhibition. I believe I mentioned that in my previous episode where I said that I sold something like 2/3 of the work before the show even opened. And I'll probably write more about that and share more about that another time. But looking back now, though, I can't say meeting Vali caused all of that, but it did spark the inspiration. And I do think that she gave me something priceless that I didn't realize at the time. It was permission. not by telling me what to do, she was showing me. She was the embodiment of permission by showing me what was possible. And so last year, during one of the most difficult seasons of my life, I found myself returning to painting again. Not because I had a business strategy and not because I needed content. It was because creating gave my heart somewhere to go when all I could do was cry at that time. I don't know whether you've ever been through that kind of dark night of the soul before, but that's all I could do. And the practice of painting was very somatic for me. The grief was pouring out of me, and the painting helped so much to transmute the energy. And I think that's what Vali understood all along, that creativity and the way that we create isn't separate from life. It's one of the ways we survive it. Maybe that's why I've been thinking about her so much lately. And it's not because she was famous, because she was. And I don't think it was because she lived unconventionally. I think it's because nearly 30 years later, she still reminds me of something I desperately needed to remember. That the world doesn't need more people waiting until they feel ready to create. It needs more people willing to create anyway, no matter what they are going through. And so, now I realize that Vali Myers was probably going through some health issues around this time, a little bit earlier than I met her. She was diagnosed with stomach cancer in late 2002 and died just a few months later in February of 2003. And she left behind more than just extraordinary artwork. She left behind permission for generations of artists to live more boldly, more honestly, and more creatively. And I believe that this is so inspiring. So thank you, Vali. Thank you, Vali. Nearly 3 decades after we sat with you on the floor of your exhibition in Fitzroy, I'm still carrying the gift that you gave me. So hopefully, those of you that are creatives and looking for a sign of when to begin, when to write your book, when to produce something that has been sitting in your psyche, on your heart for a long time, whether you are wanting to release a song or a book of poetry or share how to cook a special meal, whatever it is, see this as your sign to stop waiting and start creating, because it's the legacy that you leave behind. You never know who you are going to impact by sharing your work, by being the embodiment of your creative energy. And we live in this super nutty time of AI. Now, I'm not against AI. I just believe that it shouldn't stop us from being creative, from getting our hands, messy, or paint on our clothes, or, really making sure that we prioritize the time that it needs to, like I said, stop waiting and start creating, especially through life's uncertain seasons, because there's something magical that happens. Look at any artist that is studied in academic institutions or has been encapsulated in art history books, whatever it is. Look at the people that have created ripples in the collective, that have stamped their mark. They were individuals. They weren't relying on the artificial intelligence of a machine. And I think, and I spoke about this before in my previous episode, that I have this really big prediction that we're going to go back to wanting more analog experiences, to wanting to see the artwork in real life on the wall, the texturized paint. We're going to want to see handwritten poetry. We're going to want to see performances of, a guitarist that can sit down with their instrument and actually connect with the music rather than generating it in a machine. Like, we want hands-on, true, authentic, channeled material. This is where our lives become more rich. We become more abundant. We become more of who we are truly meant to be. And we forget about that because, and I know I'm taking a little detour here, and I'll be talking a lot about this in the upcoming masterclass that I was speaking about called How to Create Through Chaos. That is on the 7th of July. I'm going to be hosting these once a month with different topics, but it will all be under the umbrella of how to create through chaos. There are many people, especially listeners of this podcast, that have put their own creative needs on hold. while they raise a family, while they tend to paying the bills with a 9 to 5 job. And those things are very, very important. Don't get me wrong. But creativity is something that needs tending to, just like, going for a walk and exercising your body or drinking water, or it becomes like an intrinsic drive. The ideas that you can't stop thinking about. The people that you see on the internet, whether it's on Instagram, that have these incredible art pages where they're showing that they're creating all the time. They're painting new canvases, they're writing new articles, publishing new books, whatever it is. You probably get inspired more by other people because within you have that creative energy to create your own unique imprint on the collective. This is your invitation. This is your invitation. If you're listening to this right now, please let it anchor into your soul and take action. Join us for Create Through Chaos. You can join the group completely for free. There are people in there sharing their paintings that they're doing on a daily basis, or their sketches or their poetry. I know that my partner John, he's coming out with a brand new song soon. I'm going to be sharing that with people in the group as well, because he has done everything himself: the mixing, the mastering, the producing, the recording of the instruments, the singing, all of it. And there's something so magical and inspiring about that. And if we can all gather together to inspire each other to stop waiting and start creating, we remember the power that we have within us to create and build that momentum. So thank you so much for being here for this bonus episode of the Manifest podcast this week. I hope this message landed with you at the right time. Please, if you feel inspired, share this with your friends. Share it on Instagram, take a photo, tag me. I am at Sarah Prout. And until next time, I cannot wait to see what is created. Lots of love and bye for now.